Okay, we're going to go ahead and get underway. Julie, do you want to do just a quick mic check?
Sure thing, Jenny. How does this sound?
You are perfect. Everyone, happy Friday. Happy Friday, and welcome to the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series. Today's session, Digital Learning Trends Making an Impact on Student Engagement and Development. So today, I'm here to moderate for you. It's Jenny Breister on the Blackboard marketing team, and I'll help to field any questions we have in the group chat. Keep in mind, we're always open to new ideas for topics for the series, so let me know if you're interested in presenting or if you have others that you think really need to present for bits. Every webinar in this series is recorded. We have a very large following to our virtual program with the recorded sessions. And you can search for the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series playlist on our Blackboard YouTube channel. And I'm going to put that link as well as some other helpful links up as Julie gets going. But you'll find our YouTube channel has all of our bits recordings, and you'll also be receiving the recording and the presentation slides from today. And this particular slide deck is incredibly useful. And you'll have those in a follow-up email in just a few days. In addition, you'll receive an invitation to participate in our professional learning community on our Blackboard community site. So that PLC that we've got is designed to augment the series and create an avenue for ongoing collaboration, dialogue. We want you to accept that invitation and participate in the online PLC that'll come out to you with the follow-up information from today's webinar. And again, I'll put the chat in the chat. I'll put the links to the YouTube as well as information to join our PLC. Now, the rest of our series, we're winding down with our last two series, seminars for the series, I should say. On Friday, December 1st, we've got Paula Barr from Lawrence Public Schools, who will be talking about merging science and online technology, science online in their hands. And then on Friday, December 15th, Jonathan Olson with Randolph Township Schools will be talking about utilizing your Blackboard tools, building a better Blackboard. So please plan to join us for those upcoming sessions as well. And so really, it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Julie Evans, my mentor, colleague, friend for many years now, who is a CEO of Project Tomorrow. Take it away, Julie.
You're so sweet, Jenny. Thank you so very much. Well, hello, folks. I am so glad to be here with all of you today. I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the Speak Up research findings with you. But as always, I love the opportunity to hear from you. What do you see in some of the findings that I'm going to share? What questions do you have? What comments and thoughts do you have? And what are your insights from looking at some of this data? So I love the peer-to-peer learning and the sharing that we're going to do today as part of this. So as Jenny mentioned, we're going to be talking about some of the digital learning trends that we've been studying over the past couple of years. In particular, this data is from our Speak Up research project from last fall. I'll give you all the backstory on the research project itself here in just a moment. But I do want to thank Jenny and thank my good friends at Blackboard again for inviting me to be part of this. As I said, I always look forward to being part of this series. And if you want to tweet, I included my handle as well as the handle for our research project and the Blackboard K-12 handle. If you see something that you just need to make a public comment about, please feel free to do so. So I'll start off here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Project Tomorrow and the Speak Up project. That's more just to give you some context so you understand some of the findings. And then we're going to go big picture to get started. We'll talk about some of these big picture digital learning trends that we have, and then do a deeper dive into three particular focus areas for today. Digital content, what type of access and usage we're seeing from the data in K-12 schools. We'll talk about new classroom models, and we have some really interesting data findings on new classroom models. And then talk about the perception of different folks on the impact of technology on student learning, to kind of round out our conversation today. I'll also leave you with some additional resources that you might want to tap into. and also a way that you can participate in the Speak Up Research project as well. And then we'll definitely leave some time for questions, comments, thoughts, your ideas. So telling you a little bit about Project Tomorrow, we are a nonprofit education organization. We've been focused in on K-12 education exclusively since 1999, though over the last 7 or 8 years, we increasingly have been doing work in the higher education space as well. Our overall mission is to make sure that today's students are well prepared for the future. We happen to believe that the use of digital tools, content, and resources is an important way to make sure that students are well prepared for the future. We're best well known for the Speak Up Research project on digital learning. So let me tell you a little bit about that project. And again, this is the data findings I'm going to be sharing with you. So this is all good background information. So the Speak Up project is an annual research project that we've conducted since 2003. What we do is that we create a series of online surveys for K-12 students, teachers, parents, administrators, and community members, and then make those online surveys available to any K-12 school or district that wants to use them to collect feedback from your own stakeholders. So we do all the work. We do all the research and what types of questions to ask. We're the experts in how to ask questions of these different audiences. We prepare the surveys. We have the back-end customized survey collection database. We do all that back-end work for you and then facilitate the opportunity for you to use our surveys to collect feedback from your stakeholders. What we do then is give back to all the participating schools and districts all of their locally collected data, plus state and national data that you can use for benchmarks. All of that is a 100% free service that we offer to schools and districts. It is our nonprofit mission to help schools and districts make better use of their stakeholder views and feedback. And so we set up Speak Up to be able to do that for you. And again, no charge for anything that we're talking about. We take the national data, share it in webinars such as this, as well as white papers, infographics, reports, and that data is used every year by different education organizations, policymakers, state legislatures, the Department of Education, the FCC, all of the different education associations as well. First and foremost, our mission is to help schools and districts, however. Since we started Speak Up in 2003, we've collected 5 million surveys from education stakeholders, making the Speak Up database the largest collection of authentic feedback from K-12 stakeholders on their views on digital learning. So the topics covered in the Speak Up surveys are around learning and teaching with technology, as you would expect. We have different questions of different audiences. So we ask teachers what they need from a professional development standpoint. We ask the administrators what wakes you up in the middle of the night. I'm going to share that question with you. We ask all the audiences to talk to us about different emerging trends that they're seeing in the classroom. But I think one of the things that is very interesting about the Speak Up questions, which makes them highly valuable and also unique, is that we're not just asking people what they're doing, we're also asking them about how they value those experiences, what their attitudes are, and then also what their wish list is, so what their aspirations are. We believe in the final analysis that it's the triangulation of activities, attitudes, and aspirations that really is going to help give all of us a much clearer picture on the direction of digital learning and the use of stakeholder input to be able to drive those new visions going forward. So the data I'm going to be sharing with you was collected through the Speak Up surveys last fall. The surveys were open from the middle of October to the middle of January. We had a little bit over 514,000 online surveys that were submitted. And you can see the breakdown here of the different audiences and then also the distribution, particularly on community type, of the type of respondents that we had. Now, again, I want to emphasize, we don't have individual teacher take a survey or an individual student take a survey. Everything is facilitated through schools and districts. That way, we can then aggregate that data and give it back to your schools and districts in a report in the beginning of February. So all of this data is fascinating, and you'll see there's interesting things I have to share with you today. But really, the fundamental, deep down reason why we do this is that way back in 2003, and it still continues today, we see too often that schools and districts make decisions about digital learning plans based on either old information, mythology, assumptions, maybe an anecdote. So they talk to one teacher or two teachers, and then they assume that all teachers feel the same way, or one parent, two parents, and make those assumptions. Excuse me. We believe very strongly that by using the Speak Up project data, you're actually going to be able to make better decisions, because not only is the data set very large, but that it is getting beyond that anecdote or mythology. So there's wonderful opportunities also for you to participate in Speak Up, but we're going to start off by sharing some data, and then we'll talk about how you can participate. So here's my big picture part. We're going to start with the big picture digital learning trends. And I divide these trends into three buckets. What trends are we seeing that are rising in importance? What trends are still just emerging and things to keep an eye on? And what trends appear to be waning or diminishing or decreasing in either valuation by the stakeholders or in usage or implementation? So we'll start off with the ones that are rising in importance. So the types of things that we're seeing rising in importance, and again, this is based on our large collection of data through Speak Up, is a greater acceptance as well as interest in new classroom models, blended, flipped, virtual in particular. And I've got some really interesting data to share with you on that. The other thing that we see, particularly coming from administrators or from school boards or from different governance organizations, is this idea of how do we determine the return on investment on technology investments that are made? Is it just around increased student engagement, or are there actually other ways to determine that ROI? That's a really interesting conversation with administrators. We also are seeing that parents in particular are very interested in making sure that their students are well prepared for the future. And so they're particularly interested not only in digital learning experiences for their children, but also in increasing the communications they have with their child's school. And in many cases, that requires a digital line of connection. Personalization, individualization, customization, all of that is obviously front and center for many, many schools and districts. As is also this idea of the criticality of connectivity, that we need to make sure that the access that students have at school is high quality, high bandwidth, highly accessible, but also at home as well. As we're doing more and more digital learning in the classroom, that need for connectivity at home is becoming equally essential. We also are seeing a really interesting trend in terms of district offices or central offices being more involved with the vetting of digital content. We're going to talk in particular about the quality of digital content, but this idea of the vetting of digital content and coming up with approved lists or district sanctioned lists of the type of digital content that should be used in the classroom is also rising in importance, as is the accessibility of digital content as well. Now, the ones that are still emerging, and this of course depends on the school or district. Your schools maybe would put these into the area of strong importance. Other districts may say, oh my gosh, we haven't even thought about that. So based on our national data, these are the ones that we're seeing as still emerging. You know, this idea of thinking differently about teacher capacity building and professional learning is something that's really important. But a lot of people are talking about, but not necessarily doing it. The idea of students as tinkerers. So this is kind of derivative from the makerspace conversation. And I just mentioned this idea around digital content quality. This is particularly true around open education resources. How do we vet those for quality in a meaningful way? I was actually just doing a presentation earlier this morning about digital citizenship and safety, and this idea of moving beyond the conversation in a very binary sense of do you feel like you're being safe online, or do you have the skills to be safe online, into a much deeper conversation about how do we develop global citizens, particularly global citizens that are savvy and, and good users of all of this information. We also are seeing, as an emerging trend, this idea of the seamless blending of instructional materials in the classroom, and that's both using digital materials as well as print materials, but really getting away from the standalone type activities, but more that seamless blending that isn't even cognizant or isn't even consciously being done, but just is very organically being done. Augmented reality, virtual reality still emerging, as is the use of data to drive instruction. Now, the ones that we're seeing that appear to be waning, at least from the data findings, and again, these may be different in your school or district, this idea of having students use their own device at school. As some of the, particularly Chromebooks, have become a lot less expensive than they were before, districts are feeling more comfortable with providing devices for students to use as opposed to having students bring whatever device they might have into school. Now, this doesn't mean that the policies around bringing your own device to school have changed. In fact, increasingly schools are still allowing their students to bring their own devices to school, but not necessarily to use them as the primary device for instructional activities. Also, as a flip to that, district vetting and district control, greater district control over digital content or apps, we're seeing less teachers doing their own purchasing of apps or their own digital content for just their classroom. Now, game-based learning and video learning are still on the increase, but what I mean here in terms of the trend is that just having them again as standalone technology experiences is not as meaningful without a strong pedagogical foundation. So we're seeing that the idea of those type of standalone technology experiences are just watching a video or just playing a game, but not connecting it to the curriculum or connecting it to some of the other classroom goals is what we appear to see diminishing. And then this idea of one-size-fits-all teacher professional development, which we've seen over the last couple of years, districts moving away from that, but definitely appear to be diminishing in terms of either valuation by the teacher or the experience that they're having. Now, so you might be asking, well, those are really interesting trends, but what's kind of driving either the up arrows or the down arrows associated with these trends? And so we identified 4 key drivers that I thought would be interesting to share with you as we get into this conversation. The first one is this increased sense of urgency that we can see and we hear every day from school leaders, from teachers, from policy makers about how to leverage the technology investments that have already been made or will soon be made to address school and district goals. So rather than just think about, oh, it's good to have technology within our children or students' learning experiences, how do we leverage this technology so that it actually is connected into what our vision is for our school or our district? Part of that is also this focus on college and career readiness skill development. We've all been talking about this for several years. What is interesting is to actually see that now being actualized in schools and districts. And in many cases, that's tied in with using that technology most effectively. Now, we already know that parents have very high expectations around the preparation of their students for the future, and I've got some really interesting data to share with you on that. But also part and parcel of that is employer expectations, particularly around workplace skill development. And so that is also seeping into the mindset of school and district leaders as they're putting together their goals, putting together their vision, putting together their plans. Overlay all of this with this ongoing challenge that we have around teacher competency with digital tools of any kind. Obviously, we've made a lot of progress in terms of teacher professional development and professional learning to bring up teacher skill levels. However, as you'll see from some of the data, it still continues to be a challenge for many schools and districts. So what we'll do is I'm going to show you some of this data. We're going to actually get into the data. And we're going to start off with a little bit of digital learning context, kind of the state of the state that's out there. And then we're going to jump into those 3 key areas that I promised you. So this first question is one that I already teased out a little bit to you. It's actually one of my favorite questions. And it's where we ask superintendents every year, what's waking you up in the middle of the night? What challenges or demands are weighing so much on your mind that they're actually causing sleeplessness? It's a wonderful question to get to the priorities of our district superintendents. So let me share with you what the district superintendent said last fall, and then I'll give you a little perspective on some of this. So here was the top 8 items. Oh, I think it's a little bit more than 8, actually. I think I did 9 for you here. Items that the district administrators told us were waking them up in the middle of the night. Now, adequate funding has traditionally, since we've been asking this question, I think we started asking this question in 2005, so about 11 years, adequate funding has been number 1 every year that we've done that. That number changes a little bit based on where you're coming from, but it has been number 1. What is interesting to us is the fluidity or the movement in some of these wake-up issues. And we actually ask administrators to look at about 15 different wake-up issues. So some of these we've seen kind of move up and down a little bit. This idea around staff morale and motivation has been consistently moving up over the last couple years. I think a lot of that is a statement about the change that's happening in schools and the impact that's having on teachers in particular. So that one has been interesting because that one's been moving up. Now, test scores, you'll see here at 35%, you might think, I thought that would be higher. A couple of years ago, it was higher. It was much higher. So it has fallen down. Now, that's not to say that test scores are not important to superintendents, but maybe they've got their hand around how to do that or how to manage achievement measured by test scores, or they feel like they've got some stability in their test scores. So it's just not rising as a wake up in the middle of the night issue. It obviously still is important. The other 2 that we're seeing coming on strong and probably are going to be watching over the next couple of years to see how they move is this college and career readiness of students, and then also education equity. So this is the first time education equity has been in our top list here since we started polling on this. So we're going to continue to watch these as we're going through more and more Speak Up surveys. This is a question that we ask every year on the Speak Up survey, so it's a good question to watch over time. So we also asked district administrators, so what do you think has the greatest potential to enhance student achievement in your district? Now, this is also a good valuation question. So it gets to the way the superintendents and other district administrators are thinking about closing the achievement gap, solving the education equity issues, all of those different wake-up components. These are the top 5 that came up this year: enhancing teacher effectiveness, the college and career ready skill integration, STEM career exploration, leveraging technology, and developing a personalized learning plan for each student. What was interesting to us is that when we looked deeper at the data, the 3 that transcended any differences in school district size, school district sophistication, the use of technology in the school district, the community type, whether it was urban, rural, suburban, if they were affluent districts, if they were high poverty districts, were these 3: enhancing teacher effectiveness, integrating college and career ready skills, and leveraging digital tools more effectively. Those 3 were consistent across all sorts of disaggregation that we did. So those are really interesting because they actually play off of one another. So the idea of leveraging technology can be really important in terms of integrating college and career ready skills. It also can be really important in terms of enhancing teacher effectiveness. So we see a relationship between those 3. What was also interesting is that when we ask administrators, what's the types of technology challenges that you're facing every day, the number 1 technology challenge that came up from administrators was, how do I motivate teachers to change their practices to use technology more effectively in the classroom? So that is also replicated or enhanced by the fact that when we ask parents about their number 1 technology concern about their child's school, what comes up from parents is the idea that tech use varies too much from teacher to teacher. So these are kind of two different sides of the same coin. So the administrators are telling us that, how do I motivate teachers to change their practice? The parents are telling us, we're a little bit fed up with this idea that my child's second grade teacher is using technology so effectively, but in third grade, they're not using any technology. So both sides of that are really interesting, particularly when we think about how to more effectively leverage these tools to impact students' preparation for the future. Now, speaking about parents and students' preparation for the future, we asked parents last year, so what worries you about your child's future? It's kind of the question, what's waking you up in the middle of the night, mom and dad? The number one answer that came up from parents is, my child is not learning the right skills in school to be successful. And in fact, that was very consistent across elementary school parents, middle school parents, and high school parents. So this idea of the child learning the right skills is not just about high school parents being worried about their child getting into college or being able to get a good job. It actually is starting in elementary school. When we then ask parents, so what's the best way for your child to develop these skills for future success? The key answer that came up from the parents, 63% of all parents, was the use of technology regularly within their classroom instruction. So that's a very interesting wake-up call in many cases for school districts to realize that this new parental expectation around the use of technology isn't just about engagement, but it's also about developing skills for future success. Now, we also ask a series of questions about the relative importance of the use of technology for student success. And here I pulled out district administrators, principals, and parents for you. Now, everybody says it's important. The blue bar, the not important, as you can see here, is really small. So everybody says it's important. What we at Project Tomorrow pay attention to is the extremely important. So that's a valuation statement in terms of prioritization, in terms of focus, in terms of getting from conceptual to tangible use, all those different things. So we see here, for example, that 71% of district administrators view the use of technology as extremely important for student success. 60% of principals do as well. So what types of digital initiatives are schools and districts implementing today? So here's our list of the top items that came up from school administrators about the types of digital initiatives that they have implemented in their school. Now, this is a really interesting list because it's very broad. Some of it is more internally focused, so using student data to inform instruction. You can see 93% of administrators said that's a regular occurrence in their school or in their district. Same thing with online assessments. But some of these others are much more specific to the classroom or much more specific to how you're setting up the learning experience for the students. So we see, for example, online classes for students, 69% of administrators said that they have implemented those for their students. Or blended learning classroom models, 62% of administrators said that that's happening in their schools. Try and keep this slide, I'll show it to you again here in a couple of minutes, but try and keep some of these initiatives in mind because we're going to actually look at that relative to the impact on student learning here in just a couple of moments. So let's talk about digital content access and usage. You know, we saw here from the digital initiative, 73% of administrators said that they're using videos, simulations, and animations within instruction in their classrooms. Online textbooks are being used. Blended learning models inherently include digital content. So I thought that deep dive into digital content access and usage might be really interesting for you. So we ask teachers every year, what types of digital content are you using in your classroom with students? So that's an interesting set of data. But what I did for you here for today's conversation is I wanted to look at the ones where we're seeing increases. So again, the arrows are going up in terms of increased usage of these different digital content types in the classroom. So here we did comparative between what teachers told us in 2012 and what teachers told us last fall in 2016. And these are the highest items in terms of increase. So big jumps in terms of the use of online curriculum, online textbooks, game-based learning, and also self-created videos. So only a small percentage of teachers, 12% of teachers, are creating their own videos. In many cases, those are teachers that have flipped their classroom and have decided to use their own videos. But the increase in that was very high. The area where we're seeing the greatest use of digital content these days is in online videos. So videos that the teachers are not self-creating, but they're going out and they're finding. So as you can see here, 64% of teachers last fall said that they're using on a regular basis some online videos. That one continues to increase, not at the same rate as some of the other items that I'm sharing here with you, but it is continuing to increase. We also asked teachers about their preferences for not just the types of digital content they're using, but their preferences around sourcing or usage of digital content. So a couple things jump out at me here. There may be different things that jump out at you. When we look across from K-12, from K-2 teachers up to grade 9 through 12 teachers, we see that it's those high school teachers that are actually most interested in modifying that digital content to be able to meet their classroom needs. So they want a lot of flexibility. They want a lot of editability in the types of digital content that they're using. So whether that is doing an overlay on a video where they're able to incorporate some discussion questions right within the video itself, or to be able to use different segments, possibly of a game-based learning environment or some other type of online curriculum, and not having to be able to use it all possibly at the same time. These are the types of things that teachers are telling us they're interested in terms of modification ability. The other thing that jumped out at me was this inherent tension that's here between the higher percentage of teachers said that they prefer to have personally reviewed and vetted the digital content that they're using in their classroom versus the teachers that say, I really only want to use what's on our district approved list. So you've got the teachers that want to get their hands in there, take a look at the contents that I understand how this can work in my classroom, I want to spend some time with it, versus the other subset of teachers that want to work from a district approved list. I think that's a really interesting tension. It's something that we're going to be continuing to watch. Now, we asked principals last year, and actually it's a question that we ask principals every year. So what do you say are the benefits and the challenges of digital content usage by the teachers? In particular, the benefits to the student, the benefits to the teacher, the benefits to the classroom experience. So benefits, increases student engagement, comes up number one from principals. It has for a while. The principals also say that they see the opportunity for digital content usage to help personalize learning or to differentiate their school as innovative. I think it's particularly fascinating that the principals say a benefit of using digital content by their teachers is that it will improve teachers' tech skills. So I almost feel like this is a little bit like pushing that teacher maybe into the deep end of the pool, maybe that teacher that's more reluctant to use digital content, and hoping that through the use of it that they will actually improve their skills. Now, on the other side, the challenges, the number one challenge that came up from the principals was this lack of teacher training and the value associated with teacher training. Principals also talked about the infrastructure challenges. Do we have enough bandwidth? A little bit further down their challenge list is, do we have enough devices for all the students to use? Obviously, concerns about student safety online always comes up. But the one that actually has been increasing in frequency of seeing as a response from the principals is this idea of evaluating the quality of digital content for classroom usage. In particular, evaluating the quality of open education resources to make sure that not only are these resources rigorous and appropriate, but are they the types of things that will work well with the current state of what teachers know about the use of technology. So for that, we asked the principals and teachers to give us their, almost their rubric, let's call it, for how they're evaluating digital content quality. Now, they're doing this independently. So the principals have a special speak up survey they're taking, the teachers have a special speak up survey that they're taking. So they're not in collusion here. I think this is really interesting data at a school or district level to look at what your principals say, to look at what your teachers say, and see if you're on the same page, particularly as districts are increasingly making those decisions about digital content usage and doing the vetting. Are they in alignment with the way teachers think about the use of digital content and which digital content is most appropriate for them? So we see a couple things here. We see modifiable by a teacher, shared. Both principals and teachers both think that's important. Principals are a little bit more bullish on the alignment to curriculum, and if the digital content includes professional development. As you can see there, only about 22% of teachers considered that includes professional development as important for them. What was really important for the teachers, continues to be important for the teachers, is that they've been referred to this digital content by a colleague, someone that they trust, someone whose opinion matters to them. And so we think that's really interesting here in this compare and contrast. We say to teachers, what do you need to use digital content more effectively? And they identify professional development, planning time, devices for students to use, tech support. These have been sort of the traditional things that teachers have told us about. What we only see about a quarter of teachers saying are some of the more sophisticated needs. So I'd like to see a curated list of resources. I'd like to see access to tools that help me organize the content, or rubrics for evaluating the quality, or coaching on high impact lesson plan development. We're going to keep our eye on this to see if more teachers start asking for things like that. Let's talk a little bit here about classroom models. We asked the teachers to report on their classroom format. So what type of classroom are they in? The majority of them say they're in a traditional classroom, one teacher, students coming on a regular, everyday basis to class. Only 19% say that they're in a blended classroom, but that breakdown from elementary to middle school to high school is fairly consistent, a little bit more skewed to high school and elementary than middle. But what's interesting to us is that around this conversation of blended learning is that where principals see the benefits. So the engagement piece is here, but principals also really look at the opportunity of blended learning as personalizing learning, which we think is really significant. And then in terms of the challenges with implementing blended learning in particular, principals also talk again, not just about training for teachers, but how do we rethink instructional practices? How do we identify best practices for teachers? So that really struck us this year in the data. And so one of the things that we did was a very special analysis with our good friends at Blackboard, and this was actually the heart and soul of our digital learning trends report that we released with Blackboard at the ISTE conference in June. I'm going to give you the links to that in just a moment. But what we did is we said, well, let's take a look at some exemplars. And in particular, we did a study looking at teachers who have implemented blended, flipped, or virtual classrooms. And we wanted to see, do their students have a different experience? Do the teachers have different valuations? And do the teachers see that they have a different impact on their productivity as well? So the long and short of it is that when we took a look at teachers who have implemented a blended, flipped, or virtual learning classroom, a couple different things jumped out at us. One, those teachers are more likely to highly value digital learning. They're using the technology tools differently. They're using different types of digital content. And they more strongly value the role of technology, not only to improve student outcomes, but also their own effectiveness. So let me give you some of that data here, which I think is really interesting. So when we ask teachers their level of agreement with the effective use of technology within instruction is extremely important to my students' success, traditional classroom teachers, 40% agreed with that statement. For the new classroom model teachers, the blended, the flipped, and the virtual, you can see a majority of those teachers agree, and in fact, 2/3 of the teachers that are in a virtual or fully online classroom agree with that. They also are using these technology tools differently. So the new classroom model teachers are more likely to be using technology to facilitate student collaboration. They're also more likely to customize digital content to meet specific classroom needs. They're also using different types of digital content more frequently. So we see everyone is using some type of online assessments, but for the virtual classroom teacher or the teacher who has flipped their classroom or implemented a blended learning classroom, they are much more likely to be using online assessments as well as online textbooks. They're also more likely to be using, in particular, to be creating their own videos, and that was obviously very much true for the teachers that had flipped their classroom. In terms of the valuation for digital learning around personalized learning, the new classroom model teachers are much more in agreement that the use of technology helps students take greater ownership of their learning and also has the opportunity for that learning to be differentiated so that it matches their students' own individual styles. And then finally here, as part of this set of data, the special analysis that we did, we looked at the idea of technology within a teacher's practice and said, okay, do you see opportunities for your instructional practice to result in more personalized learning for your students? And in fact, amongst the teachers that were in those blended classrooms, those flipped environments, or a virtual classroom, fully online classroom, they were much more proactive in terms of saying that the use of technology provided opportunities for personalized instruction for their students than the traditional teachers. As I said, this bit of data here was part of our digital learning trends report, and I'm going to give you that link here in just a moment so that you can have that as well. Though, of course, Jenny can always send that back out to you, or she can probably point to where that is on their website as well. So let's just close here before we get into some of your questions, your comments. I've seen a couple things that have come up in the chat. Talk about the impact on student learning. Lots of folks will say, oh my gosh, how do we justify our digital learning? How do we quantify our digital learning? So what's interesting for us is that we looked at this through a couple different lenses. We started off with that list of what types of digital initiatives schools and districts are implementing. Remember, we talked about this one early on, where the administrators reported as to what was implemented in their schools. We took that same list and we asked the administrators, so tell us of these items, what percentage of you would agree that you are already seeing positive academic outcomes from these particular digital learning initiatives that you've implemented? And so here's the lineup here of what the administrators told us. So 69% of the administrators said that the use of student data to inform instruction is having a positive academic outcome. 43% looked at the use of videos, simulations, animations within instruction as driving more positive outcomes. The idea of having a one-to-one mobile device assigned for students to use in school, 42% of the administrators said they were seeing positive outcomes associated with that. So this is a really interesting bit of data. As I said, we actually asked district administrators about 15 different initiatives. I just pulled a few of them here for you. But we also then asked parents, teachers, and students to talk to us about their valuation around the use of technology for learning. So I want to give you each one of these individually because they actually create a really interesting mosaic, shall we say, about the impact on student learning. So from the parents, and we had, just to remind you, we had about 30,000 parents that took the survey last year. We asked the parents, so let us know about where you think the value is in terms of impacting student outcomes. The parents came up with these top 5 items. As you can see, these are very heavily focused in on those right skills or the types of workplace skills that actually employers and parents have been interested in. So very much a laser focus on this college and career readiness from the parent perspective and tying that to technology usage. Now the teacher responses are a little bit different. We asked the same thing of teachers, asked them to comment about their students. They mentioned collaborating with others more, developing creativity skills, 2 of those workplace skills. But they also talked about the learning experience. So their students were more motivated to learn. There's the engagement piece. They also had a better understanding of course materials if technology was involved. And also the learning was more tailored to fit their personal styles. So on the main, the teachers were more focused in on what the learning experience was in the classroom, a little bit about some of the workplace skills, but not to the extent that parents were. And then the student response was really fascinating because the students brought in both of them. So I included for you a longer list of student responses just because they had very high valuation from the students, much higher in many cases than the parents or teachers did. So we see both here. We see that students talk about developing creativity skills, collaborating with others, developing critical thinking and problem solving skills. But they also talk about what it means for them personally. So the opportunity to learn at their own pace, the opportunity to have a better understanding of what they're learning, to be in control of their learning was important for them in a way that meets their own learning styles. So we saw a really interesting mix from the students. What was really interesting to us here, and something that I've been spending a lot of time talking with folks about, is that where many of us will talk about the value of technology around student engagement, the students say maybe not so much, that maybe this development of the skills is more important for them. Maybe the way that they are developing self-efficacy as a learner is more important to them. So it's not to say that engagement isn't a good measurable outcome around the use of technology, particularly for evaluating the impact. But let's not leave it just as engagement with the students. Let's not hang on to some mythology maybe that the only reason students are interested in the use of technology is engagement, because the students actually tell us otherwise. So finally here, before I open up to some additional questions or your comments, I want to give you a few more resources to tap into. Visit us at tomorrow.org. It's a wonderful resource. That's our website for all sorts of different types of speak up data that's available to you. We put our national reports there. We also create anywhere from 10 to 15 infographics every year. All of this is downloadable so that you can have access to it. We also put presentations there, webinars, some podcasts are there. This particular infographic is one of my favorites. It's 10 things everyone should know about K-12 students' digital learning. This is the 2017 version, which means that we were looking at the 2016 data, the data I just shared with you. It's 10 quick things. It's really easy to download and to share within your administration. You can share it with parents. You can share it with the school board. It's really a fabulous conversation starter for a PLC to take a look at these 10 things and say, okay, does this sync with our assumptions? Are we hanging on to some conventional wisdom which may not already be true? Anyway, come visit us at tomorrow.org and you'll see all those different infographics are there. In addition, I mentioned that digital learning trends report that we do every year with Blackboard. We've been doing it now for 10 years. Here's the URLs for the report itself. You can download that from Blackboard. In addition to that, my good friends at Blackboard, they're so creative. They created a special digital learning trends infographic. And so you can also download that infographic. It's a snapshot, obviously, of some of the data findings I shared with you here, but also in the report. The report is much more narrative, so you can take a look at that and spend some time, depending upon what your reading preference is, infographic or a report. And of course, no matter what school or district you are with, anywhere around the world, you can participate in Speak Up. Speak Up is open to any K-12 schools or districts that want to use these surveys to collect feedback from your stakeholders. So we do have surveys available for K-12 students, for parents, teachers, librarians, school and district level administrators, technology leaders, community members, and also communications officers. So the surveys are open right now. They opened in October. They'll be open through January 2018. Come visit us at tomorrow.org/speakup, and all the information is there about how you can get your school or district to participate. Again, we give back to you all of your locally collected data as well as state and national data that you can then be able to use as benchmarks. Thank you, Jenny, for putting that corrected link there in the chat. So with that, Jenny, I'm going to stop talking for a moment and see if we have some other questions or comments from folks, if people want to share some of their perceptions or their interpretations of the data. I'm open to anything you want to talk about.
Sounds great. That was phenomenal information, Julie, as always. And we have had some interesting comments in the chat, and I wanted to explore something that Barbara raised, which is a good kind of just discussion point for those. Everybody in our here is coming from a different place. We've got, virtual educator versus traditional, and she was saying that it amazes her that the lack of training, and I believe it was from the teacher surveys, lack of training posed as a challenge, and yet there are a plethora of training available online or on site. Many are free. She notes that Blackboard is one such organization that provides that type of training, and how can that be? I've got some thoughts too, but I wanted to open it back to you first, Julie, on your thoughts of why the lack of training seems to be posed as a continuous challenge when there are lots of training opportunities online or on site.
Yeah, it's a great point. I love talking about this. So 2 things I want to bring up here. One is, please keep in mind that when we're looking at the Speak Up data, particularly from teachers, we had about 38,000 teachers take the survey last year. We have within our data set the full adoption curve of teachers, because we have districts that mandate that all their teachers are going to take the Speak Up survey. They use it as their institutional district-wide survey for teachers. So I was telling people this morning, and they looked at me like I was a crazy person. We will have teachers in our data set who share completing surveys that are high-end users of technology and teachers that don't use an ATM. And so the idea of using technology in the classroom is so foreign a concept to them because of that widespread. So we get both sides of that. So when we talk about the lack of teacher training, it in many cases from the administrators, they're looking out at their teachers at their school or their teachers within their district, and they're seeing that same adoption curve. More and more what we're finding is that the frustration with teacher training is not necessarily the lack of availability of teacher training, but the lack of high impact teacher training. So yes, there is a lot of different training out there and a lot of really high quality training, but from a principal perspective or from a district administrator perspective, they're not seeing the change in practice. And so they're looking at it and saying, I thought that training, whether it was self-directed, whether it was individualized, whether it was an online class, whether it was a sit and get, whatever it might be, I thought that training would help move my teachers to a different place in terms of thinking about the use of technology, but I haven't seen those results yet. Now, part of this is also possibly a misunderstanding on the part of administrators who, in many cases, and I've had this conversation with principals, I've had this conversation with superintendents, believe, well, all we have to do is send teacher Mrs. Smith to this training or send our entire 3rd grade team to this training, and they'll come back and poof, they'll be able to use this technology seamlessly. It'll be integrated within instruction. We'll see student achievement results improve, all those different things. We see quite realistically that even with intensive training and mentoring and coaching, which we see as the most effective type of training, that it can be a multi-year process before teachers feel fully comfortable. They really do need to go through that full adoption process to be able to use the technology most effectively to really get to that seamless integration. And so that lack of training on the part identified by the principals may also be a representative of that sense of urgency to see results more quickly without an understanding of what that adoption curve really can look like.
Yeah. And Barbara's put in some additional comments that I wanted to kind of expand on. She was talking about follow-up being key, and that for trainings to be successful, they need support from all. It's that support factor I wanted to ask you about as well, Julie. how much do you think leadership and advocacy play into the success of training? There's plenty of training out there, but the direction and the support that comes with that from the leadership, meaning that it's provided during that there are resources made available and communicated, and time for teachers to be able to make use of that training without taking away from their students and all those kinds of things. How much do you think the advocacy and availability of leadership and support come into it?
Jenny, every day of the week when folks will say to me, what's the difference between school A and school B, or district X and district Y, in terms of how successful they're being with technology integration and the implementation of digital learning or the implementation of personalized learning, whatever it might be. When they ask me what the difference is, every single day of the week, I will say the same answer. It has to do with the quality of the leadership at that school or district. And increasingly, we are seeing that that is not just a lip service comment, but really it filters down to the level of support that teachers are getting in terms of their implementations, their confidence factor, their self-efficacy in using these tools, and understanding that the support will only be there if the leader at the school values that level of support. So that this role of leadership is critically important. And in many cases, unfortunately, we don't necessarily see that school districts are spending the requisite amount of time or investment on developing the appropriate leadership skills for the first line administrators and also the district or central office administrators to be good digital leaders for their teachers and for their staff. So that there is definitely a linkage there. Jenny, a couple of years ago, we did this with Blackboard. We did a special report on digital leaders, the role of administrators in leadership around digital learning. And it was really a fascinating report in terms of looking at what are the characteristics of the most effective district and school site administrator for leading change around digital learning. So yeah, there's a huge play there around leadership, and the teachers realize it as well. I have, as Jenny knows, I do 30 to 35 focus groups a year with teachers, with students, with parents, sometimes with principals, all around the country. And the teachers' focus groups are particularly interesting because teacher frustration with the lack of understanding on the part of their principals as to what the change process needs to look like and what digital learning really looks like in the classroom gets to that heart of not effective leadership as well. So that's a real issue, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Thanks to Barbara. Thanks. So let me let everybody, if you've got other questions or comments for Julie, feel free to put those in the chat. And I jotted one down that I know has come up in some of the user conferences that I've been a part of in person, Julie, that kind of some of the things that you talked about made me think about it again. You mentioned, I love the stats that you shared on the standalone technology use diminishing amongst teachers, and that parents have been saying that a top concern is the lack of consistency of technology between teachers at different grade levels. And I'm one of those parents. I can't understand how in one grade we've got a plethora of great online tools, and then just a semester later it's antiquated again. It's back and forth, back and forth. I'm just curious what you think in terms of like the chicken and egg question. Do you think that the teachers are finding that they are better off when they're supported by using the tools that fellow teachers are using and things like that, so they're getting away with the standalone because they're finding themselves more effective? Or do you think that they're kind of being forced to because the parents and students are demanding more? I think it's kind of a combination of all. Everybody's just kind of, in any one institution, people are just playing off each other how successful they are in adopting technology.
I agree with you, Jenny. I think it's a combination of the two. I think that there is, as teachers, as are going through the same process many of us are. We're learning to unlearn and relearn much more quickly than we ever did before, and that includes around digital products as well. So as teachers are getting more comfortable using digital products and digital tools in their personal life, they're then starting to make that translation into how to use similar tools or same tools with their students in the classroom. They're also getting affirmation of that from parents, particularly younger parents that are more digitally savvy themselves. And so that's driving not only the demand, but also the affirmation around some of that. And also from their students as well. So I think it's both a push and a pull. I think that, we're seeing that teachers are getting more comfortable with using these tools and thus are doing more experimentation with the tools. But then there's also these increased demands that are out there and increased availability of the tools. Overwhelmingly, though, where teachers will look for support is from their peers and their colleagues. And so I am always so excited about different types of professional learning communities and opportunities for teachers to learn from each other. And that's where teachers will say to me, Twitter is the best professional development tool I've ever had because of that immediacy and also the access that they have to additional resources. So I think it's actually really positive thinking forward about, sort of thinking about teachers leapfrogging in terms of their competencies and comfort level with using technology because of where we are today.
Wow, that's really good stuff. All right, so if we don't have any other questions or comments in the chat, I think we've covered them all thus far, and all of the helpful links April and others have asked, make sure we have the right links, so I think we're good there. With that, Julie, we really can't thank you enough for sharing all this valuable data, and I know our virtual community will be very excited to hear this recording as well. And I also want to mention that Dr. Julie Evans has a small band of folks at Project Tomorrow behind the scenes that support her, and I want to just do a shout out for them as well. We thank them. Barbara did also have this one last comment here about Twitter certainly making collaboration and learning more alive, transition into a more positive direction. So I don't know, Julie, if you have any last comments on that before we head out, while we give everyone your contact information here.
I'll just say I agree with Barbara. I mean, it is fascinating to me to see teachers that are even reluctant to use different types of technology saying that they follow all these folks on Twitter and that they've got these Twitter pals that they are sharing resources with. So whether it's Twitter, or yesterday I was at a conference and folks were talking about the PLC that they have on Facebook, whatever the tools might be, the idea of getting teachers away from that isolation in their classroom and being able to collaborate with peers and colleagues across the world even, I think is all very, very positive and a really positive step for enhancing their effectiveness in the classroom.
Indeed. Well, very good, everyone. So I want to say thanks also to our participants today, and look forward to the resources that I'll be sharing post-webinar in just a few days. Everyone have a fabulous Thanksgiving, and we look forward to seeing you at our next BITS session. Have a great Friday, everybody. Bye-bye.